Anger. Anger is often seen as the enemy of peace, the root of conflict, and something to suppress for the sake of civility. But anger is actually one of the most important emotional signals we have. When you feel angry, your brain is essentially alerting you that a core value, belief, or boundary has been violated. It's a psychological alarm system, your body preparing you to respond to perceived injustice or danger. Without it, you'd have no instinctive drive to speak up when you're being treated unfairly, or to protect yourself or others when harm is near. Anger is not inherently about violence or chaos. It's about justice, self-respect, and reaction to threat. On a neurological level, anger activates the amygdala, the brain center of processing threats, and triggers the hypothalamus to release stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. These chemicals prepare your body for action by increasing heart rate and blood flow to your muscles. But here's the twist. Studies from the University of Amsterdam show that people who allow themselves to experience anger in a conscious, measured way often perform better in negotiations, assert themselves more effectively, and even experience a sense of control and clarity. In short, healthy anger isn't something to run from. It's a tool. Learn how to wield it, and it becomes a sword that cuts through complacency and leads to constructive change. Jealousy. Jealousy usually makes us feel small, petty, or ashamed. We look at someone else's success, beauty, or happiness and feel a tight knot in our chest. But here's something no one tells you. Jealousy isn't about them. It's about you. At its core, jealousy is a reflection of your desires, your values, and your unmet goals. When you envy someone who's achieved something, your brain is signaling that you value that same thing, and that maybe you haven't given yourself permission to chase it or don't know how. From a scientific perspective, jealousy activates brain regions involved in social comparison, such as the ventral striatum and the anterior cingulate cortex. These regions are also linked to processing pain, which is why jealousy can physically hurt. However, psychologists point out that when harnessed properly, jealousy becomes a motivational emotion. One study published in Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin found that people who viewed jealousy as a learning opportunity rather than a character flaw were more likely to set and achieve personal goals. So rather than judging yourself for feeling jealous, ask, what is this emotion pointing me toward? That shift in mindset can turn envy into fuel for growth. Guilt. Guilt is uncomfortable. It eats at you, lingers in your thoughts, and makes you question your actions or even your worth. But unlike shame, which tells you that you are a bad person, guilt tells you that you did something that violated your own values. And that's incredibly useful. It means you have an inner moral compass and it's working. Guilt is what compels us to apologize, to make amends, and to reflect on how our actions affect others. It's a self-correcting emotion that contributes to empathy, social bonding, and emotional maturity. Neurologically, guilt lights up areas of the brain associated with decision-making and social cognition, especially the medial prefrontal cortex and the anterior insula. These are the same regions that help you imagine how someone else feels, essential for building compassion. Studies have found that moderate guilt provenance correlates with higher levels of trustworthiness and moral reasoning. Interestingly, guilt also increases the likelihood of prosocial behavior, even small things like being more generous or helpful in social settings. So, while guilt doesn't feel good in the moment, it's actually a powerful internal feedback system. When balanced, it helps you grow into someone more aligned with your own ideals. Sadness. Sadness often gets a bad reputation. We're taught to put on a smile, stay positive, and avoid negative vibes at all costs. But sadness isn't weakness. It's a vital emotional response to loss, disappointment, or significant change. It slows us down, encourages introspection, and allows us to process complex emotional states. When you feel sad, your brain is helping you withdraw temporarily to reflect, recognize your thoughts, and emotionally recalibrate. Without sadness, we wouldn't properly mourn relationships, learn from failure, or appreciate joy. In fact, psychologists suggest that the ability to experience sadness deeply is closely tied to emotional depth and empathy. Sadness activates parts of the brain related to self-awareness and social bonding, including the subgenual anterior cingulate cortex and the insula. These areas regulate emotional expression and connect with the limbic system, which processes grief and attachment. Research at the University of California found that people who allow themselves to feel sadness and express it healthily show greater emotional resilience over time compared to those who suppress it. It's like cleaning a wound. Yes, it stings, but it's essential for healing. Sadness isn't a malfunction of the mind. It's part of our natural emotional cycle, one that eventually makes space for hope, peace, and clarity. Anxiety. Anxiety is one of the most commonly misunderstood emotions. Many see it as something to eliminate, medicate, or suppress, but anxiety exists for a reason. It evolved as a survival tool, keeping our ancestors alert to dangers like predators or environmental threats. Today, though we rarely face life or death situations, our brains still use anxiety as an early warning system. At moderate levels, anxiety sharpens attention, boosts motivation, and improves memory encoding, essential for problem solving and preparation. Anxiety involves hyperactivation of the amygdala, as well as the prefrontal cortex, the brain's reasoning hub. This combination explains why anxious people often overthink or anticipate worst-case scenarios. But studies show that when channeled properly, anxiety can enhance decision-making under pressure and foster greater emotional intelligence. In other words, anxiety isn't inherently bad. It's the misuse of it that becomes destructive. When you stop seeing anxiety as an enemy and start treating it like a signal, you begin to decode what your mind is trying to prepare you for. Boredom. Boredom feels uncomfortable. It's the itch to do something, anything, to escape the silence in your own minds. But boredom is not an emotional failure. In fact, it's a cognitive reset, a mental state that creates the psychological space needed for imagination to kick in. When you're bored, your brain is searching for meaning, prompting you to explore new thoughts, ideas, or directions. It's what pushes children to invent games out of nothing, and what drives inventors to tinker and question. Without boredom, we'd be trapped in the loop of passive consumption, never creating, never exploring. Boredom involves the default mode network, a system of brain regions including the medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and angular gyrus. These areas activate when we are not focused on the outside world, and instead turn inward to reflect, dream, and plan. Participants who experienced moderate boredom were significantly more creative when tasked with problem solving afterward. So next time you feel that yawning sense of disinterest, don't rush to fill it with noise or screens. Sit with it, let your mind wander, because out of that useless feeling often comes the next breakthrough: loneliness. Loneliness is heavy. It's not just being alone, it's feeling unwanted, disconnected, and unseen. While that sounds like a purely negative experience, loneliness actually evolved as a critical social signal. Just like hunger tells you to eat and thirst tells you to drink, loneliness tells you to reconnect. It pushes you to seek companionship, build community, or repair broken relationships. It's your brain's way of saying, we're not meant to do this alone. Far from being a sign of failure, loneliness is proof that you're wired for belonging. Loneliness affects the same brain circuits involved in physical pain. Studies show that the anterior cingulate cortex, activated when someone feels socially excluded, is the same region triggered by a physical injury. This shared pain circuitry is part of what makes human empathy and cooperation so powerful. Chronic loneliness is dangerous, yes, but momentary loneliness is a catalyst. It sharpens your awareness of social dynamics and motivates you to engage more deeply with others. Recognizing this emotion rather than running from it helps you build more intentional, meaningful relationships. Embarrassment. Nobody enjoys embarrassment. It's awkward, painful, and makes us want to disappear. But that hot flush in your cheeks and racing heartbeat, that's your social brain kicking into high gear. Embarrassment involved as a social regulator, a way of showing others that we recognize we've broken a norm and that we care about the social consequences. It's what makes people more forgiving of mistakes because it signals humility, self-awareness, and the desire to restore harmony. The science behind embarrassment points to the involvement of the prefrontal cortex and the temporal parietal junction, regions tied to self-evaluation and understanding how others perceive us. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more fascinating content. Share this video to your friends and family. Stay curious, and I'll see you in the next video.